Hi, my name is Hamna. I'm a film production and theatre student, which is, as you can probably tell, why I felt slightly more inclined to kind of talk about what's been going on in the news at the moment, particularly what's going on with the government and the way that, in my opinion, they are being really dismissive of the creative industry. Disclaimer, this is an opinion video. So, if you don't agree with me, that is totally okay. The point of this is to have conversation. I'm more than open and welcome to have that conversation. And in the same thread, I probably haven't looked into everything that I probably could have and or should have. If there's anything that you think that I've missed, again, I'd very much like to be taught about that. I'm not here to bash anyone's opinions. On a personal note, feel really let down by the government. Firstly, as a student and the way that they've treated students during the pandemic, and secondly, as somebody who's about to graduate and enter the industry. And to be quite honest with you, I don't even know if I have an industry to enter into. I'm going to be referring to my laptop because I have a whole lot of stuff on here and that's the best way for me to do this. Why am I making this video? Last week, Rishi Sunak did an interview with ITV News Politics. ITV News Politics had tweeted that out with the title, Rishi Sunak suggests musicians and others in the arts should retrain and find other jobs. This then was taken down and changed to then read, Rishi Sunak says people in all walks of life are having to adapt for employment. I'll let you watch it and come to your own conclusion about it. As far as I'm concerned, I feel like, as most politicians do, he dodged the question and didn't exactly give a straight answer, which doesn't help anybody, and of course caused more outrage because the creative industries feel really neglected at the moment. So to not be supported in that and to not be given a straight answer is just infuriating and frustrating for a lot of people. This video is also being made because, at least as far as I'm concerned, on social media today, Monday the 12th of October 2020, there was an ad made by Cyberfirst endorsed by the government, which has been floating around, that looks like this. I'm somewhere here. It looks like this, which quite frankly, in my opinion, feels really tone deaf. It feels really eerie. The idea to say that the people in these ads just don't know that their careers are going to be turned cyber, whatever cyber is meant to mean, might I add, is kind of ludicrous and disrespectful to those people that have spent not even hours, not even days, not even months, but years training for something that they are so passionate about, for the things that are their calling. It's also disrespectful. There's so many other jobs that were involved, even in the creation of the ad itself. There was no way this ad would have been made without people within the creative industries. So in order for me to talk about this, I wanted to talk about some of the statistics of what the creative industries were bringing to the UK economy before the pandemic. And this was spurred on because I found a press release from February of 2020 by the government themselves, which was titled, UK's creative industries contributes almost £13 million to the UK economy every hour. That's not every day, that's not every week, that's not every month. That is every hour. Even that alone frustrates me, right? This press release read, creative industries contributed more than £111 billion to the UK economy in 2018. This was up 7.4% from the previous year, meaning growth in the sector, and get ready for this, was more than 5 times larger than growth across the UK economy as a whole. Now here's my thing. Already, on that alone, I would feel that, considering we're probably in the worst recession that we've seen, at least in a long time, you'd think that the government would be helping to support the sectors that are going to help bring that back up, especially because now we can't even use tourism to help us. Surely then we should be looking at other ways to boost our economy. To further my point, as a whole, the DCMS contributed £224.1 billion to the UK economy in 2018, accounting for 11.7% of the economy. That is the total economy. 11.7%, right? The cultural sector contributed £32.3 billion to the UK economy in 2018. This was up 2.7% from the previous year, so 2017. And the subsector, film, TV and music, made up 3/5 of this sector, contributing £21.3 billion. I then found a website called thecreativeindustries.co.uk, and here is a graphic which kind of just breaks down what the press release was saying, and you can pause or whatever to kind of just take a look at the way that it breaks it down and how much is coming from various different creative industries in the UK. It's also worth noting that in terms of creative industry service exports, in 2018 it was up 8.9% from 2017, which in my opinion is just proof of how much the UK contributes to international creative industries and how much that is just constantly growing, or was constantly growing prior to the pandemic hitting. Also from the creativeindustries.co.uk, there were a couple of statistics about the economy and jobs, which to be honest I wasn't even fully aware of, so it's really fascinating to me that the creative economy of the UK in 2018 comprised of 3.2 million jobs. This is the equivalent to 1 in 11 UK jobs. Back in October of 2015, GLA Economics did a report on the creative industries in London, which was backed by the Mayor of London. And there is a quote talking about the impact creative industries had on the post-recessionary period of 2009 to 2012, in which, and I quote, "The creative industries showed relatively higher growth than London's economy as a whole." London, which is meant to be the financial hub of the United Kingdom. I'd also like to make the point that I'm aware many of my peers who are in creative industries, or at least hoping to make it in creative industries, have probably heard through their training there's no money available there, it's not a legitimate job, there's no point you going for it. These are starting to prove that that's not the case. Earlier today, in which I explained the creative industries don't just rely on people in the spotlight, they don't just rely on musicians and singers and actors. It requires so many other people at so many different levels. We need people from every walk of life and trained in every different way to make us work, which means there's a place for lots of people within the industry and you can get a job from it. I'm someone that looks a lot at behind the scenes. I'm really interested in directing and producing, and personally I wish that there was more of a focus on things like that, like sound engineering, like tech. That's all really significant to keep us going, like being a lawyer, like being our accountants, because Lord knows we need that. There is a place for so many different people to be involved, is what I'm saying. I wanted to take a minute to talk about media consumption during lockdown. Some of these statistics are coming from Ofcom, and they have said people spend twice as much time watching subscription streaming services. In 2019, this was a total of 34 minutes a day. In April of 2020, this was up to 1 hour and 11 minutes, a 31% increase and an increase of 37 minutes. During lockdown, the average adult was consuming nearly 6.5 hours worth of media, and as you can see here, this is how it kind of breaks it up in terms of the responses that Ofcom received. Ofcom spoke to adults and asked them how many of you would keep the streaming services that you've probably bought during lockdown in the following months. 96% of them had said they would keep Netflix, 91% said they would keep Prime Video, and 84% said they would keep Disney+. 55% said they would continue to spend the same amount of time watching streamed content in the future as they did during lockdown. Remember that again, this was nearly 6.5 hours per day on average. So that's a lot, that's really substantial. Started thinking about it when trying to work out what I wanted to say in this video, was wondering how many people joined said streaming services when lockdown had hit. Because I know a lot of people, they didn't already have it, you know, what else were they going to do? They now had a reason to maybe look into this content. According to the BBC, Spotify reached 130 million paid subscribers and their monthly active users had risen to 31% in that quarter. Radio consumers went up to 25% in the UK, with online radio listening jumping to 15% since UK's lockdown began. It's really fascinating because probably the reason that people might have held back on having these subscriptions beforehand was money having to go to some other hobby or something else that they were doing, or they just didn't have the time to sit and maybe listen to podcasts, listen to albums, like as much as they used to at the very least. But now that they had a reason to, it means that the creative industries are having to meet that demand. They're having to create the content in order to reach that. An argument I made earlier was with the increase in demand for creative content in order to get through the pandemic, it means that very quickly there's going to be a shortage and people are going to be frustrated. And as a result, people within the creative industries are going to be the ones to feel it. Given the way the government went about their messaging for Eat Out to Help Out, and then went ahead and blamed it on the young people who were actually primarily probably essential workers, went out to help the economy by doing Eat Out to Help Out, went back to universities, went back to schools because they told them it was COVID secure. I wouldn't put it past them to eventually, when that frustration builds up, to then put the blame on the people within the industries. And I'm concerned about that. As much as we're the most resilient, we also are not the type of people that are usually only taking part in the creative industries. We're usually doing more, and we probably were. But we weren't told of a way that we could return to our jobs, return to our passions. So what else were we meant to do? Which swiftly brings me on to my next point, which is, I know some people are probably going to be wondering, well, the government agreed to give a bailout. Yes, there was a bailout, but that's been stalled. And this is the thing that really gets to me, because I found an article in The Guardian that talked about it and gave the reason why this bailout had been stalled, and it boggles my mind. According to The Guardian, the £1.57 billion bailout, which was pledged in July, has been stalled because of, quote, complexity and volume of applications. Now you'd think, by agreeing to support the creative industries, you would be aware that industries with seemingly no idea of when they're going to return would scramble at the opportunity of having some support in order to survive. How could you not be aware of how many applications you were going to receive and how vast of a difference there is in not only different industries but different organizations within the industries and what they require financially? We are not a one-size-fits-all kind of industry. We require different amounts of money for different things. We require different resources for different projects. And as a result, there was no way that it was only going to work for in one way or another. And like I said, the bailout was agreed in July. We're now in October. According to an article in the Times, the government claimed that 1,300 arts organisations are going to be saved by a £250 million bailout fund, which is being released today. Theatres, art venues and museums will be told this morning whether they were successful in claiming grants of up to £1 million. Now here's my issue. This is £250 million out of the £1.57 billion which has been agreed upon as a bailout. That's only 1,300 of the arts organisations in the UK. I'm not even entirely sure how that breaks down into where they are across the UK. And theatres, art venues and museums being told this morning whether or not they'd be successful, that makes it harder for these organisations to plan ahead and to know whether or not they can keep supporting the people that they have hired. The people working for them aren't going to be sure if they will be able to survive or have the money to keep them going. They don't know if they will be able to return to work or if they have to find something else. It's really frustrating, and it just leaves people in limbo, and that is not okay. There are so many people that are already struggling because of the pandemic. We can't keep letting this happen. I also wasn't able to read the rest of this article because of a paywall. I'm a student. Don't blame me, I wasn't about to pay a subscription to the Times for this. But in the same thread, according to The Conversation, 3 million UK taxpayers have been unable to access meaningful government support. What's interesting to me is that apparently 15% of the general public in the United Kingdom are freelancers. But that differs when you're looking at creative industries. That goes up to 47% of people. Let me say this, that is 47% of the creative industries are freelancers. We've established that, according to statistics from Creative Industries UK, that as of 2018 there were 3.2 million people working in creative industries. So that's nearly 1.6 million people that are freelancers and that are relying on government support. I'm just gonna let that sit there for a second. Nearly 1.6 million people likely going to be without support. Here's another thing about the bailout. In an article from NME, back in June, Horace Trowbridge, the General Secretary of the Musicians Union, and Julian Bird, Chief Executive of UK Theatre and Society of London Theatre, estimated that half of all music venues and 70% of theatres across the UK could face permanent closure. And to be honest with you, I kind of struggled to find the statistics of how many of those actually have faced closure. I know there were a few, and the scary thing about that is legitimately that when it's safe to do so, the industries just might not be able to come back from this. When they were this conglomerate that brought in so much money to begin with, it doesn't make sense to me. Somebody mentioned to me it might be interesting to take a look at what happened during Thatcher's era, where they were essentially saying that they were trying to retrain entire industries. I found an article on Japan Times which said this about Thatcher's era. Thatcher took office in 1979 in difficult economic times. Her government quickly identified Britain's overmanned and non-competitive industry as the cause of economic malaise. Does that sound familiar? The government today are kind of suggesting that creative industries are simply a hobby, that there's nothing really significant in it, and that train of thought has been translated into society, and as a result, you know, a lot of us get told that a lot. But the data shows otherwise. It's also just really fascinating to me that the government is kind of allowing history to repeat itself. We're talking about when Thatcher took over in 1979. We're now in 2020. 40 years, that is 40 years, and the same things being repeated. And if that does happen, then we're gonna face the same consequences as the Thatcher era did, and as a result, future governments are going to have to clean up that mess, like they did with Thatcher's government. The loss of skilled manufacturing jobs widened inequality with negative consequences for social mobility. In the 1980s, income equality between the top and the bottom 20% of British households widened by 60%. Inequality continued to rise with only minor fluctuations under Britain's next three prime ministers, John Major, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. The storyteller in me really wishes that there was like a happy ending to this, or like I could tell you that and it all went well. But to be honest with you, I have no idea what's going to come from this. Honestly, the government haven't been consistent and arguably haven't been going about dealing with the pandemic in the right way. Actually, in the time of me filming this video, I came across a tweet of another article from The Stage which says art jobs in the West End could plummet by 95% in the next 4 years if central London is subject to repeated lockdowns and the sector is not supported, a report from the Heart of London Business Alliance has warned. The hope and the way that I see it is that, like I've already said, people in the creative industries are resilient. The industries are resilient. I don't imagine a reality in where we are not letting this go down without a fight. We always have. I like to hope we're going to persevere through this, because we always have. You know, there's been so much in history and yet the arts have remained. It's just another fight. At least this time round, we can see the true effects of us rallying behind each other, which I think is really important. I think community is really significant right now, and I think that's the most reassuring part of all this. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I know this is a long video. Like I said, I'd appreciate hearing thoughts. Stay safe, look after your loved ones, keep fighting the good fight, in whatever form that takes. Alright, bye.